when it got to the point where he was going to get up and play, he did a speech. Then he asked everybody to come up close to the stage. And so I went up there, and I was standing right next to Conan O'Brien. For me, this was huge because when I got to college, I would watch Conan every night. And if I have, a Mount Rushmore, Bruce and Conan make up 2/4. And after the show was over, I never do this where I ask anyone for an autograph or a picture, but I asked Conan if I could have a picture. And I had one of these old cruddy flip phones that didn't take very good pictures. And this is at the point where most people in the world had an iPhone. So I'm really already very embarrassed to even ask him for it. And his wife takes the phone from me. He's like, yep, no problem. And he's going to go along with it. And then because it's an old cruddy phone that nobody knows how to work, she exits out of the camera instead of taking the picture. And I'm just so embarrassed that I'm taking up their time. I have a picture of Conan O'Brien, with kind of the band in the back, where he's smiling. And all I ever think about when I look at that photo is oh, I'm so embarrassed and he's so annoyed to take this photo with me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and joining me is a new friend. We find out that we have geographical roots together. So, Levi, welcome to the show.
Jesse, thank you very much for having me on. Very excited to talk to you after all this time.
Yeah, it was nice. Levi is one of the people that had saw Ken Rosen's very nice article on Backstreet talking to me, and he said, hey, you really are looking for people to talk? And I go, I'm always looking for people to talk. So we set this up, and I'm just thrilled you're here.
Yeah, and I was definitely aware of who you were and had listened before because I've been a big fan of JB and Rob's podcast.
Yes.
So I've listened to you on there, and so I was like, oh, well, I got to make sure check it out. So I would check in every once in a while, and then when I saw the article on Backstreets, I was like, oh my God, Jesse Jackson, yes. So was very happy to reach out, and thank you, for having me on.
Well, that is great. So yes, love JB and Rob. We name check each other so much in each other's podcast. So tell us a little about yourself.
Well, like I was just telling you before we started recording, I am from kind of the Lafayette, Louisiana area, Cajun country, but I was born in the little town of Jennings and grew up in a small town called Elton. And my dad lives near where you grew up, kind of outside the Lake Charles area. So that's kind of where I was born and raised, and then spent some time in Chicago. And I've lived in Los Angeles for the last 12 years. I'm an actor and a musician, songwriter, heavily influenced by Mr. Bruce Springsteen. But that's it's kind of been my deal. Just got married a couple of months ago to a lady whose first words to me were, "Hey, I like that Springsteen song that you guys just played." So,
well, all right, that is a good way to worm. Okay, speak more to me. That is hilarious. I want to go back to my grandparents live in my grandparents lived in Rose Pine, Louisiana. I was born in Leesville. So yes, all that little, Jennings. In fact, I think my wife went to, before she went to college, she attended Sewella Tech there in Lake Charles, and there was a lady from Jennings attending it with her doing office administration. I think we went to a wedding in Jennings that was in a very small, unair-conditioned hall with a Cajun band playing, and the father of the bride was having more fun than anyone else. It was I'm paying for this shindig. I am going to dance on every dance and eat every bit of food and drink every drink. And we talk about that all the time, that it was a heck of a wedding. So
Okay, yeah, always are. It's I guess Cajun weddings and Dothraki weddings like go hand in
yes,
hand.
and we we moved to Dallas in '84, so we were about in our middle 20s, and we miss the culture, we miss the food, but we do not miss Louisiana itself. At times, it's a very red state. At times, it's a very, as I've shared, before we hit record, I was just there this weekend visiting my mom, and when we went out in Publix, they have no interest in wearing a mask. They just like, nope, don't need it, and we're just like, really? Like, really? So yes, but it is good. So I want to get to your growing up, but talk a little bit about your. No, let's start with that. Let's start with growing up. So you said you got to Chicago. How much time was in Louisiana, and then when did you go up north?
So I was in Louisiana until I was 21. I went to college in the town of Natchitoches, which was pretty close to Leesville. And after
is that north?
Yeah, northwest. We're northwestern states.
Okay. So Chris, my son, went to Stephen F. Austin in Nacogdoches. They're sister cities.
People always I gave tours for the city of Natchitoches on these trolleys, and people would come in and always confuse us with Nacogdoches.
Yes. In fact, I had to be very careful when I was saying that because I'd say it wrong. My wife, before COVID, she and her girlfriends would try to go for the Christmas Lights Festival and the tour of the homes, and meat pies was always a good girls' trip for December.
Yeah, I haven't been able to go to the Christmas festival in a long time, but when we were in college, we always did a big Christmas show, and it was always packed. Like that, you see if you ever watch Steel Magnolias, that's basically what it is. That Christmas festival is the town's festival, and people come from all over, and all December it is just packed with people who want to see it. And it's not even a lot of lights either.
Yes.
It's a very small area, but it's beautiful.
Yeah. And we, one year they went, Uber had not, wasn't a thing yet, and it was impossible to get a cab, right? They were like, because they had gone drinking, and so talked about it. Well, growing up there in Jennings and Elton and other small towns, what kind of music did your family listen to? Obviously some kind, because you're a musician yourself, but
but no one else in my family is a musician. My sisters, I think, were in band and probably played saxophone maybe when they were younger, but they kind of gave it up going into high school. But that just missed me. I didn't learn how to play my guitar until probably like 10 years ago. But growing up, we listened to a lot of classic rock in the house. My dad was really into disco and funk, and was kind of a life of the party guy. And obviously Cajun music was always around. But I was born in '82. And so it's, for me, like, I remember my childhood being a lot of that early '90s country music as well. Yes. And there was a radio station, KSMB, so like all the pop hits of the day and '90s alternative. And I feel like it was also the era of the classic rock stars, like last grasp of like real worldwide recognition, like kind of that era where Billy Joel or Paul McCartney, Tom Petty, Mellencamp, all having these hits, like probably hitting their early 40s and having these really big hits that played on MTV and VH1 a lot in the early '90s, and then kind of fade out into becoming like these elder statesmen. That's what I remember a lot about.
So you must have been in the era, because I'm older than you. I was born in '59. I remember talking to people, sleepovers of MTV, watching, like I can remember Don Kirshner's rock concert on Friday nights. That was as close to MTV as we had. You would have this hour and a half rotating of different musicians starting at midnight, playing on Friday night there in Lake Charles. I also make the joke that, growing up in Lake Charles, we, in Rose Pine, we listened to both kinds of music, country and Western. Thank you, John Belushi. So, and yes, definitely your share of, it was, I know you remember Saturday afternoons after cartoons, they switched to the live Cajun music and they would be playing
Yeah.
it.
Oh yeah.
Like there'd be a local Le Baton Roulet and just this great music and I think that is why Jolie Blanc is on my list of songs I want to see Bruce perform live once. Yeah.
I heard you say that on your list that you made.
Yeah.
Which, right, by the way, I'm sure anybody listening to your podcast, as soon as the first episode you guys did of that, got my list ready to go.
Oh, good.
Future. But yes, I picked up on that, I guess, is when I really started to clue in, oh yes, we're kind of from the same area and have those roots.
So when you got to high school, so you're finding your own path, and in college, how about that? What kind of music then?
If you've ever been asked the question, is there a song that changed your life? For me, I can say, seeing footage of the Sex Pistols on a VH1 clip show, they were doing Anarchy in the UK, which now as a Sex Pistols fan is not even one of my favorite Sex Pistols songs, but yeah. I had never heard anything like that. I was very curious, what is this? And it just led me into the Clash, the Ramones, all of these British rock bands. A lot of the music that I write and play, while there's a big Springsteen influence and some country influence, I'd say it's just as much loving the punk, new wave, post-punk, all bands that come from the UK. Those are things that I really get into. And that's kind of where I started to discover all of that and get into that. I was also a big Blink-182 fan, somebody reminded me of today.
So I usually ask this question, and I will ask again. I will ask it when we get to Bruce, but can you put in words what about that Sex Pistols song and that genre spoke to you?
It was the power of Steve Jones's guitar, just the tone of it, and people specifically with the Sex Pistols just put them in as being a punk band, but really they were just a loud rock and roll band at kind of a medium tempo, and the lyrics are great, the songs are great, just real anger, and just a young man trying to get that frustration out. And I had also watched a documentary on them that just kind of made me buy into this myth of the band and this mystique, and just a whole era that I missed out on that I had no idea existed and wasn't even an American thing. So it was just something that, oh wow, I want to understand what this is. But I think it was just the noise of the guitar, of picking up that guitar and just coming out and ready to take over the world.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that it's influenced your own music, but you also talk about Bruce. So when did Bruce come into the equation? Growing up, I definitely remember the album cover of Born in the USA, and I know that was in our house, and would have recognized some of those songs. And as a kid in the early 90s, I definitely remember the videos for Human Touch and 57 Channels and Streets of Philadelphia. And Bruce Springsteen always jumped out at me as kind of this, I don't know, he was iconic. There was just something about him where you recognize that this was a man with presence. But I have two very distinct memories of just kind of realizing that Bruce Springsteen is just on some other level. I was in college, and it was the MTV VMA Awards. He played, I think The Rising was about to come out or just come out, and he and the E Street Band were playing in front of this giant sphere in New York, and which I later learned was the
the planetarium, the Sphere at the planetarium. And I don't know, I just became obsessed with the song The Rising. And then a few years later, after I'd moved to Chicago, there was this radio station called XRT that played rock music, 50s up until whatever that time would have been, I guess about 2005 or 6. And this song came on as I'm driving up Lakeshore Drive, and it just sounds like the most awesome representation of what rock and roll music is supposed to be, just the joy and the release and the energy. And it's just, tell him this is his last chance, his daughter in a fine romance, the record company, Rosie, just gave me a big advance. And there's something that hit me, and I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is what people talk about with Bruce Springsteen. Like, this is what it means to be alive and play rock and roll music and be young and have fun. And I don't know, from that point on, Bruce Springsteen was everything to me, and I became an obsessive fan. And it was right before Magic came out. So I started to become even more, like a bigger fan, diving deep into things right around that time. So it would have been late 2006 going into 2007.
So did you start working backwards on his catalog? I mean, what was your next paths? Because, this is it. Like for me, and I've shared this before, right? When 1977, I buy my first Beach Boy 8-track, I'm blown away, because as a high school kid, I loved Kiss and I loved, AM radio, and I'd never heard harmonies like the Beach Boys. And so I'm going to every record store trying to going to the B's, like, oh, I don't have this album, I don't, but you have a little bit more, when you find Bruce. So what was your path to explore more of his music?
I wish it were that scientific. I'm pretty sure I just illegally downloaded a lot of Bruce Springsteen songs off of LimeWire. Nothing
wrong with that. I understand. Yes.
And then just started to kind of piece them together from there. I remember we had this place that I worked in Chicago. We had Sirius XM, and the song "Prove It All Night" came on.
Okay.
And I just remember hearing that and being like, my God, that's Bruce Springsteen too. And so I obsessed over that song for a little while. And that probably led me into Darkness. And I think my dad had just gotten me the Hammersmith Odeon concert that they had just released on like a double CD. So I started to piece everything together from there as well. And then that's when Magic came out. So I feel like I started off with old man Springsteen, or like going into, and that's, for me, that's my favorite. I like the elder statesman of rock, that guy.
That's funny, because I have the same, I certainly, and I, repeating myself, right, but I certainly remember I bought The River, and I remember Hungry Heart on the radio, and Born in the USA, and Tunnel of Love. But my true obsession was 2002, 2001, The Rising CD, and seeing him in concert for the first time took me from, a passionate fan to a obsessed fan. And, so I do not have a sentiment and attachment to, like, they talk about 78 concerts and, oh, this was the greatness, the Darkness era. And then I'm just loving, because, I love Magic. I love Wrecking Ball. I'm, I want Prove It All Night, 78 intro. No, I want Girls in Their Summer Clothes, right? Like, and just because, and I think you just said it perfectly, the statesman Springsteen was my Springsteen, and it's where I go through. And even though I love them all, there is a sense of affection toward these albums because they were there and it was great. That's interesting. Do you, and this may be, you haven't thought about this, but what are the things that are in common, or what balances your love of the Sex Pistols, the Ramones, this punk energy music, and Bruce Springsteen? I know he loved The Clash, and I know, like, London Calling, he did that, and I'm sure you were like, yes! Yeah. But have you thought about that? What's that connection for you?
I think Bruce kind of writes the same way now that, you know, after I learned how to play guitar and wanted to learn all of these songs, chord progressions are very similar with, I guess that style where Bruce
Yeah.
has a lot of 3 chords, 4 chords in the truth type of
Yes.
thing to his music. And there's, it's funny with the Rip Van Springsteen thing that you
Yeah.
did like a while back or a little while ago. I went through and I was like, well, if I was going to do this for somebody, and I kind of broke it down into all these categories of what I
Yeah.
think Bruce Springsteen represents. And a lot of that goes into the punk rock is, you know, the 3 chords in the truth, having fun, social justice, warrior. There's energy. I think that's what Bruce Springsteen just has an energy about him that is, when you put it all out there, it's rock and roll. It's making rock and roll music, which I think a lot of the punk rock music that I get into, that's what it is. It's like you want a good beat. You can also say something within there and have some power with it too. For me, that's what it is. And there's something very powerful about Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, there is. I always like to preface this question, and as you've listened to the show, right? The number of times you've seen Bruce live, it's not a fair barometer of your fandom.
Right.
You grew up in Southwest Louisiana or Southwest Louisiana. The thought of, because
They don't play
Baton
Bruce
Rouge.
Springsteen.
They don't play New Orleans. You don't go. I mean, you get Willie Nelson maybe, so. And the thought of driving to Houston to see a show just was like, never thought of it. So for the records though, have you seen him live? And if so, how many times?
Yes, in total. So I think 3 regular concerts, 1 kind of special, unique situation for the Music Cares Person of the Year.
Oh, you were there?
I was there. Yeah.
I've got to hear a story from that.
Sure. Yeah. I was working as an Acura spokesperson.
Okay.
So like I would go to car shows, and it was like one of my kind of fill-in actor jobs. And Acura was a sponsor of the Music Cares, and they asked me like, "Hey, would you like to do this?" And I saw that it was going to be honoring Bruce Springsteen. I was like, "Oh my God, yes!" And so tried not to freak out so that they wouldn't hire me.
Yeah.
But they put me in there. I remember Gary Talent coming by, like while there was this, I heard Bruce sound checking before, like in the room right next door. I was like, oh my God, like he's gonna play later tonight too. And they had all this Springsteen memorabilia and artwork. And I remember Gary Talent coming by and just like, oh, hey, Mr. Talent, like shook his hand. But when it was time for the show and the ceremony, I just went out there and got to see the entire thing. And I found a little table off to the side where Kathy Griffin and Adam Lambert were sitting. And I was just like, I'm just going to sit down here. I'm just going to pull up a chair. I've got a suit on with like a dark tie. It looks like I belong. And I'm some music executive. So I'm just sure I'm just going to act like I belong. And, it was a really cool event. Jon Stewart was there and said some stuff. Bruce got up and gave a great speech. There's this one line he gave that I remember where he talked about like, we as musicians, we burn everything down in our lives and then skip down the street prancing along merrily. It's something to that effect.
I remember saying like, and we are bad with our money, this is like, we are bad with our money. And one of the things I've loved about him when he did that, and then when he was like in Austin for Southwest, right? He talked about and he does this a lot, the importance yet the unimportance of rock and roll. Like he talks a lot about this is the most serious thing you do, and at the same time, it isn't worth anything, and I love that he can balance both sides of that when he's talking about it, and in his mind he does that.
When it got to the point where he was going to get up and play, he did a speech, then he asked everybody to come up close to the stage, and so I went up there, and I was standing right next to Conan O'Brien. Okay. And for me, this was huge because when I got to college, I would watch Conan every night. And if I have a Mount Rushmore, Bruce and Conan make up 2/4
There you
of
got
that
it. Yes.
for me. And after the show was over, I never do this where I ask anyone for an autograph or a picture, but I asked Conan if I could have a picture. And I had one of these old cruddy flip phones that didn't take very good pictures.
Yeah.
And this is at the point where most people in the world had an iPhone.
Yeah.
And so I'm really already very embarrassed to even ask him for it. And his wife takes the phone from me. He's like, yep, no problem. And he's going to go along with it. And then because it's an old cruddy phone that nobody knows how to work, she like exits out of the camera instead of taking the picture. And I'm just so embarrassed that I'm taking up their time. So
Yeah.
I have a picture of Conan O'Brien, with like kind of the band in the back, where he's smiling. And all I ever think about when I look at that photo is like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. And he's so annoyed to take this photo with me. They, of course, have never given it another thought in their lives.
Right. That's a great story, though.
Yeah. So there was that. And then I saw the Broadway show. Got to a friend of mine. I didn't win the tickets. A friend of mine won them. And he ended up not being able to go. So we'd already booked the tickets to go to New York.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend at the time, who's from New York and was going to be there anyway for work, she loves Bruce, and so we got to go together, and it was a really special night. I remember like just sobbing for the first 30 minutes straight. It was such an emotional thing.
Yeah, I right there with you. I did not expect to get to go, and then when I did, I just could not believe it. And I've talked about this before, right? You don't realize how funny it is now that everyone can see it on Netflix and they can see, but at the time you weren't expecting it to be funny as well as touching. And it's it is a beautiful way. You mentioned you're an actor and a musician. So talk a little bit, how did your journey bring you to California? And you're going to school in, I guess northwest, right? Louisiana. And so
northwest.
Yeah, the Chicago. How do you get to LA and, join the arts as a career?
So when I was in high school, I had the drama bug, but as you know, being in the South and from Louisiana, even though I was into all the nerdy things, I also was a jock and played sports. So instead of doing drama after school, I was playing football. And but for some reason, I still had it in me to where like I knew I wanted to act or be on stage or do something. So I would do the school plays in this kind of the spring term of the high school year. And when it was time for me to figure out what to do next with going to college, I still don't even remember how it happened, but I talked to my guidance counselor about it. And he said, well, there's a college, Northwestern State, where you can audition to get into their drama program. And he arranged an audition, and I went up there not really knowing anything, looking back on it, not knowing what I was doing, but they took pity on me and said, yeah, I guess we need more guys in our theater department. And they gave me a scholarship. And just one of the best things to ever happen to me. But then when that time was up, I still didn't really know what I was going to do. I knew that you moved to Los Angeles or you moved to New York, but I auditioned for a graduate school in California and got into it. But I was dating someone who was going to go to Chicago for the summer, and I thought, oh well, this will be kind of our last hurrah, and I'll go up there with you. And I just remember the first morning walking outside the apartment that we'd rented for the summer. It was so beautiful right on the lake, and you saw the skyline. I thought, I'm never leaving. I'm going to stay here. And I think after about a year, I had just, kind of figured out how to audition and where to go. And I got into this acting program at a theater there called the Steppenwolf Theater. And I met that summer 12 other people that we would form a theater company together with called the Centerman Ensemble, named after the Nina Simone song. And we started doing shows. And after a few years, I just got it in my head that I was just ready for something else. And just ended up kind of feels like a whim sometimes when I try to piece it all together. Moved to Los Angeles, and 12 years have gone by. Some of the years are a blur. but it worked out. I know it worked out the way that it was supposed to. But in that time, I went from always, obsessing over music and wanting to learn how to play music to finally learning how to play the guitar and write songs. And eventually just had some friends. We started to put a band together. And I think it's probably been about 7 years since we started playing music together, and we've released some things, and it's been the whole ups and downs of being an independent musician. No real glory to speak of, but things I'm very proud of, and keep plugging away at it. This the past 7 or 8 months have been pretty difficult because everything feels like it's come to a standstill, but keep hammering away. And if there's one thing that I think that the pandemic has reinforced in me, is that I still feel that this is what I was meant to do, like to be an entertainer, to be a storyteller in some way, and to write this stuff and perform. And luckily I have a wife now that is extremely supportive of that as well. So she keeps pushing me to go on these things. And I'm working on a show right now. It's like a live immersive theater show, one of probably like the only things that are open in the city, where people can actually get out and come to and stay safe while we get to perform. But still writing music, and hope to continue releasing things, and who knows where that will lead me, but still plugging away.
So I always think it's interesting, Levi, and I've shared this story before. I got to be friends with a singer-songwriter from Austin named Sarah Hickman, and Sarah was signed by Elektra, and then was dropped, and she's done a dozen albums, all independent, and different things. And but she, when she tells the story, she can't remember not writing songs. Like from the moment she could, had a thought in her head, she was writing songs, and just grew up that. And as she learned the guitar and worked on her music and worked on her ability, you came to it late. Why do you think it came to you late? And what was finally the push that made you leap into that, creative endeavor?
It came to me late because I was lazy and
Okay.
just wouldn't move forward with actually doing the work of learning the instrument.
Yes.
When I was 9, I think my parents got me a little electric piano, but then just assumed I was going to teach myself.
Right.
So I never had lessons. I didn't learn. But when I moved to Los Angeles, I was in a play with some Irish musicians who held a jam session every week. And so I would go down to this little bar patio of this Irish pub in Santa Monica, and I would sit in the back, and I would learn the guitar chords and learn how to play those songs. And this really wonderful man named John McKenna, who was great actor and really great musician, he would humor me and let me ruin the Irish jam session by letting me play a rock and roll song or some country song that I had learned, much to the chagrin of everyone else there. But that's pretty much why I learned, is because I was in this show with other people who were doing it, and I finally said, okay, I want to learn how to do this. And around this time, I think, it's like the website ultimateguitar.com was available, so you could look up guitar chords, see where your fingers went, very easily. And I could learn to play like, oh, okay, this is, your fingers go here, this is where it moves during the song. And I think one of the first songs I learned, I think it was Dancing in the Dark, just something I could strum along to.
So how did your songwriting gene happen then? So I can understand, okay, I've not been putting the work in. I've enough stalling I'm gonna do, and you focus on that. But how do you find that inner muse?
Honestly, Jesse, my brain sometimes just thinks in melody and comes
Okay.
out in a sing-songy way. And so I just get this idea and just start to write lyrics down to it. Or if I just pick up a journal in the morning and start writing something, by the time I get to the end of the line, like I'm humming a melody to go with it. And it's just the way my mind kind of works.
Did you have that before you started learning a guitar? Or
I did, yes.
okay,
I had notebooks that I've held on to from like when I lived in Chicago before I knew how to play.
Okay.
That I had the whole idea for the song and wrote it down in sections. And, 5 years later, I could go back and look at them and be like, oh yeah, I remember exactly how that song's supposed to go. And now I know how to make the A chord into the E or something like
That's
that.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's great. That's very cool. So I'll ask you again at the end, but if someone wants to check out your music, where's the best way to go find it?
I'm on Spotify. If people just want to look me up, it's Levi, Levi, last name Petree, Petree. Also, the website is levipetree.com. And if anybody wants to follow along on Instagram, it's LP and the RP.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, absolutely. So you mentioned Bruce is an influence, as well as the Ramones and the Sex Pistols. And, it's always hard, right? Like, you ask Stephen King, where do you get your ideas, right? Like he says, they're in from my heart of a little boy that I keep under my bed or something. So when you mention it's an influence, is it the storytelling? Is it the lyrics? Is it the music? Or it's just a mood that he presents?
I think it's what's so great about Bruce Springsteen is it's different kind of facets of his personality, where when I picture Bruce Springsteen, I also kind of think of him and equate him to Sam Shepard in a way, just like this mythic Western American persona.
Sure.
And I feel like I have learned through listening to Bruce Springsteen's music and reading about him, and like the thought that he puts into being an artist and being a songwriter and the messaging that he wants to put out there. I feel very shaped over the course of the last 15, 17 years of my life. I'm like, oh, what type of man would I like to grow into, learning about responsibility and love and relationships, maturing into an adult, growing out of the adolescence.
He's been very clear. I've been impressed by that. When I heard there was going to be an autobiography, I was curious how much he would share. I say this with great love in my heart. Sometimes Bruce is not a very good interview.
I put a note down there. I wanted to bring that up with you. I heard you say that, and I was like, yes, I know exactly what you mean. So I'm glad that you think that.
And I think it's because sometimes he's self-conscious talking about himself. But in the book, he was very open about his challenges, the depression, but also very open about his successes. Like, it wasn't like he was humble. And we have the sports station here in Dallas. They make fun of Garth Brooks because they say Garth Brooks is fake humble. Like, oh, I can't believe y'all are applauding me. And I'm like, okay, I think you guys are being a little unfair to Garth Brooks, but I get what you mean, right? And Bruce does seem very confident. And then when he talked about in Broadway and then in Western Stars, even more. So I can see how, because he's telling you his journey as a man. As an actor and as a musician, what did you think of Western Stars? Because I think that is a very visual album.
I love Western Stars. Like there are a lot of other things to unpack there.
Okay.
Number one, he cited Glenn Campbell, like those Jimmy Webb songs as a big influence. Well, I love that. Like, I read like a YouTube comment, like, Bruce was making music for my grandparents. Well, that's fine with me because my grandparents had a big hand in like the music that I listened to, and so I love it. Exactly,
Levi. I've shared many times. My mom loved Glenn Campbell. We used to watch the Glenn Campbell Good Time Hour.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
That is Yes, it is like, that's my jam, as they say. I
Yeah.
love that. Yes.
Yes. I mean, I have just a very, very vivid memory of riding with my grandpa, listening to Glenn Campbell's greatest hits and Gentle on My Mind and Galveston, and just actually like making him sick of it, how much I just wanted to keep listening to it because I picked up on it and loved it so much. So there's that aspect of it. I mean, the songs are great. Sometimes it kind of breaks my heart where people are so, hold on to so much of his, like Springsteen's early catalog, which, one of the greatest catalogs in the history of music, but not that something like Western Stars is never going to get the love that those early things have, because it is great.
Yes.
It's so great. And I feel bad for people that don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've taught you, and you have probably heard this. I feel the Graham Yost, the guy who wrote Justified, the series about, Louis L'Amour, Zan Grey. There is this, it feels like Nebraska, a collection of short stories, but, and it just, this, all these characters in the West and, dealing with age and, and their foibles. It's a beautiful album and a surprising album. And so the only thing that surpasses it, at least in my mind, is as crappy as 2020 is, you hear, oh, we may get a new Bruce album.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and it may be an E Street album. Oh, wait. And then you get it and you're like, holy moly. Like he's 70 when he's doing this, and he's still got a fastball to mix our metaphors, right?
I was just listening to it before we hopped on the phone here. One of the themes that I love about the latest album, Letter to You, is it's also about like bands and music. And so it's made me think a lot about, just in my very short time, just the people that I've played music with and what a special bond that is. So like Last Man Standing, I think, has probably been one of my favorite songs from the album. I love Rainmaker. Somebody the other day brought that up. I was like, yes, that's a great song. What do you think of the song House of a Thousand Guitars?
So I like it. I think I've made the joke. Someone on Twitter said, his wife said, "Don't get any ideas," and I love that joke. Sam, who I talk a lot on the podcast, said he needed to edit saying "House of a Thousand Cars" a couple of times, and I would like the song more. Is what Sam thought. I think it's good. Power Prayer, for some reason, really speaks to me. And I don't know why, because I cannot figure out what If I Was a Priest means. I don't know the story, but I've said, right, it's what Outlaw Pete should have been. And I love that album. And I love that song, If I Was a Priest. And I don't even know why I think that about Outlaw Pete, but there's that connection to me. I guess there's that Western and Catholicism mix,
Are you saying you hate the song Outlaw Pete? Because that is my song that I absolutely hate.
It is not a song I adore.
Yeah.
It is one. Now I will share it, and I do not know why. I bought the children's book because, hey, I'm a whore, and after reading the book, I liked the song more. Reading the book, I did, but I still don't love it.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just liked it a little bit more because I guess I kind of got more of the story.
Yeah, you're more invested in it now. And,
yes.
And I bet if I would go back and listen to it, I would, maybe I would give it another chance. But if I was the priest, it reminded me of the band when I listened to it. And then House of a Thousand Guitars, that was the first time my buddy Ryan and I, we went on a drive, as soon as it came out, we just went for a drive and listened to the whole album. And it was like, I don't know about this one. Like, I really like the melody of it, but I don't know if lyrically, it reaches up to what he's trying to do. But then I've just listened to it so much that it's just haunted me for some reason, that I've come around to feeling like if the song is supposed to be about whatever is next in life or the afterlife or something, that's where we're all going to meet. Like, okay, I can get behind the cheesiness of some of these
Okay,
lyrics,
there you go.
and
I like that.
and it really works for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've listened to that album a lot.
Yes, I have too. And it is it has been such a surprise in doing. You know, you've kind of shared already, but do you have other stories from shows that you want to share?
Sure. You know, the first one was in Chicago, like on the Magic tour. The record had just come out, and I bought 4 tickets off of eBay. So
Okay.
on the way there, we were pretty sure that they were counterfeit tickets, and we were never going to get in because they were general admission. Like, it came out to $50 a piece. And I guess that's what most other people on eBay must have thought, that they were a scam tickets, and that's why nobody bid on them. So when we got there and they scanned the tickets in, we got in, and we're like, oh my God, this is great. And then we got in the lottery to be right at the front, or like a row or two towards the front. And it was just so cool. I remember you can find it on YouTube, but I'd been following the set lists and knew that, you know, he was pretty much going from Thundercrack into Girls in Their Summer Clothes for the encore. But then he came out and he saw this young kid in the front and said, you know, a lot of young people in the audience, so why don't we play some of my young man's music? And they played Thunder Road for like the first time, and I guess since early in the Rising tour. And so that's just a special memory I have of being there with my, you know, 3 of my best friends at the time in Chicago. And then I remember when Wrecking Ball came out, because I'm such a big fan, people can probably be like you're too hard on the artist that you love, and you're skeptical for some reason. So I didn't warm up to Wrecking Ball right away. Like, I didn't just buy it, you know, sight unseen or sound unheard. But I went to Jazz Fest in New Orleans where he was playing, and I bought tickets for a bunch of other family members. And I just remember getting there early so I could be as close as possible. And those songs on Wrecking Ball just kind of came to life for me, and I had to get it right away as soon as it was done. I got it. Like, everything just kind of for me. So yeah, that's probably the best stories, I guess. I did buy scam tickets to one here in Orange, that was in Orange County. But
oh no!
I met some pit guys who came up, or I guess who had like been following. They were friends of the pit crew, and so for like an extra money, they gave us wristbands, and so we got in about 6 songs into the concert. So
okay, that was something.
Yeah.
That's good. Very cool. How about when he tours again, knock on wood, are there songs you would chase that you would love to hear live that you haven't? And we could say all of Western Stars and all of Letter to You, right?
Yeah,
but
I would love to hear the E Street Band do Western Stars.
Yes, I would have.
I think that'd be really cool. I've also really gotten into those early 90s albums too lately. Lucky Town and Human Touch. There's some really good songs on there. If you go on YouTube, I think you can watch like the whole 20-song concert of the MTV Plugged. And man, he rips. He is like Jersey guitar hero legend in that era. And it'd be kind of cool it would be awesome to see what he did with the E Street Band, like with those songs as well. But those are some really good songs, especially the ones on Lucky Town.
Well, you think about it, you know, Atlantic City was on Nebraska, and it somehow has developed into, you know, an E Street Band song now. You know, the E Street Band does it well. And I would love to hear, in fact, you know, I loved Little Steven's version of Tucson Train.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and so they did a great version of that. And then just, I guess a few months ago, they did a video where they took all these old Westerns, right? And they pushed them together. And I don't know if you've not seen that.
No,
Yeah,
I haven't seen that.
yeah. If you Google, there is a video of Little Steven and the Disciples of Soul doing Tucson Train, and it is with shots from all these old westerns. Is the whole thing. So it's really good. So you should check that out.
I will. I'll do it probably once we end.
Good. All right. So except for those, what are some other songs you might want to hear?
I wish I'd have gone to a 2016 River show and just been able to be in the crowd when he comes out and goes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and goes to Meet Me in the City Tonight. I that song has so much energy.
Yes.
I love it. This Hard Land is my favorite Bruce Springsteen song, and I would love to hear that.
Why is that your favorite?
It's one that my dad had the greatest hit CD, and I never listened to it. I just, for whatever reason, never listened to that song until they made the music video of it that they released where he plays it acoustic. And so I got the whole message, and I thought it was so beautiful. And I know that it's one that Bruce loves himself as well. And so whether in that acoustic form or the greatest hits or tracks version, it's something that just hits me right in the heart. And it did, that last verse makes me cry sometimes. What others? Badlands is my favorite. I think I have an alarm set to the New York version, so it's just Bruce Springsteen going 1, 2 and time to get up in the morning.
How fun.
What else have I not? I guess the ones that I've never heard Rosalita live, and that was kind of one of the ones that made me go, oh, this is what people talk about. I kind of love going to a Bruce show and not knowing what's coming.
Yes, that is kind of fun.
So,
what was the song your band played that your lovely bride came and said, "Hey, I like that song"?
Oh, we were playing "I'm Going Down."
Okay.
We would cover that one, and she told me that when she was in college, they used to get ready to that song, to go out for the night.
Oh, how fun!
Yeah. So that was, a Springsteen song that changed your life. I wrote that down for the list. I'm like, well, I'm sure probably nobody else would have that down, but that's one that literally changed my life.
So what I'm going to do is, after we finish the episode, let's pull up our calendars and let's book you, and we'll do the songs of your life as a separate episode. So,
sure, sounds good.
All right, that's good. All right, before I get to the Mary question, what have I not asked you that I should have?
You know what? This has been exciting for me because I wanted to ask you questions.
Okay, go for it.
So having, kind of grown up in the same place, I know that you were kind of in a different Springsteen era while you were in Louisiana, but in my era, I felt like they don't really play a lot of Bruce Springsteen music. He wasn't on our local radio stations a lot.
No.
For me, he was on MTV a good bit. But so I know that people from our area don't have a lot of the love for Bruce Springsteen because he was not a big artist that they pushed on you down there. And I just kind of wonder what that was like for you, your discovery.
I may have told this story before, and if not, I mean, it's worth, I remember going to the barber shop in Moss Bluff, Louisiana. Mm-hmm. And this is, I guess, 76, 77, 75, I guess. And this is embarrassing. I don't know the date because it's obvious. Either Time or Newsweek were at the barbershop with him as the cover. So that's the time frame. And it's whichever one that says Rock's Biggest Star.
Okay.
And I see this and I go, who's this guy? Have they never heard of Elton John? Have they never heard of Barry Manilow? Have they never heard? I mean, this guy, I don't even know who this guy is. That's how out of, it was out of. I've often wondered if Bruce ever charted early enough that in the 70s, Casey Kasem, an American Top 40, would have had a Bruce Springsteen story. You know, and I think I've tried to Google it, and that's too specific. It doesn't come up to. So there was no thought about him, and it wasn't till 1980. And I know I've told this story. One of my wife's best friends, a lady named Lisa Mesh, and Lisa Mesh went to New Orleans, got her degree, and then went up to the Northeast to go to school for college. And she came back talking about this guy named Bruce Springsteen and how wonderful he was. And she had, and none of us had ever heard of him. I didn't connect this, barbershop that I did, as a sophomore or junior. And I remember buying The River, and then Hungry Hearts started to be on the radio. But no, this was no idea. And I stand Levi. I know it's impractical to think that a 16-year-old Jesse, but even an 18-year-old Jesse, because I turned 18 in 77, 78, he's in Houston, right? Like, he hasn't gotten big yet. He's playing small clubs in Houston. And back then the drinking age was 18. So I could have gone to a club, but my parents would have looked at me like, what are you doing? What do you mean you're driving 3 hours to go to a show? But I often think about if time travel was possible, that would be cool to go back and to drive to Houston and see them at that time in these small clubs in Houston, and kind of, hey, Bruce, how you doing? And just, are you going down lately? Or, throwing song lyrics or something. So, yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for that. And then, one other random thing not related to Bruce, but I've heard you say his name a couple times. Are you, you've referenced the comedian and magician Matt Donnelly.
Yes.
Are you a Scoop as well? Like, do you?
Yes, I am.
So one of my best friends from college, who also went to Northwestern State, is audio guy Jacob.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'd heard you say that a couple times. Like, oh, I bet he might be a Scoop.
Matt was on the show once.
Really?
Yeah, I'll have to send you a link. It was early in the show. He called me on the way home because at the time, Ice Cream Social was nominated for like this award, and so was Set Listing Bruce. I was for music and he was on comedy, and I promoted, like, every time I promoted, hey, go here and vote for Set Listing Bruce, I said, and always under comedy, right, for Ice Cream Social. And a couple of times Matt and them said the same thing. So yeah, I'm a huge P1 of Penn Sunday School, and I listen to Matt's Abracadabra, and yeah, just I think they're amazing. They're just so much fun. And he's been nice enough. I've seen him twice. And once when he was opening for Piff, and he pretended he recognized me, or at least when I spoke to him, my name was, he goes, oh yeah, Jesse from the Bruce podcast. So he talked about being on again. So I would love to have him on again. Yeah. Great guy.
Awesome. I don't know if there's anything else
Okay.
jumping out at me.
All right. Think of something later. Like I said, we're gonna schedule another time where you can do your songs of your life, because I'd love to do that. But I can't let you go till you give me the Mary question. So
okay. All right.
For those of you who may not be aware, Jay Armstrong, honors English teacher in the Philadelphia area. Every year he takes 2 days, and his seniors, they break apart Thunder Road as a poem. They look at the imagery in the lyrics. They talk about the themes of the song. And at the end of the 2 days, he asks this class, does Mary get in the car? So, Levi, your question is, does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Absolutely, she does. Absolutely. It's that is a time and an age where the promise is still real, and the adventure of what's before you, I feel like you can't pass up. Hopefully Mary trusts the narrator, but it's yes, in my mind, and I know other people have said this, where like the rest of the album
Yes.
kind of backs it up, but that's what the whole the night's one magical summer evening, and that's what the night is, or the album's about. But just in the song, I feel like everything is building to take my hand, like open the door, let's just bust through these roads, like we've got it. So for me, it's absolutely.
All right, there we go.
Yeah.
That is a good answer. This has been a blast. I hope you've had fun.
Oh, I've had a great time.
Great.
Great time.
Is there, okay, so once again, tell us where we can find your music, and I take it you're doing most of your, before COVID, acting was local, or is there anything we could see?
Yeah, I mean, not, you'd really have to search. So music is probably the best place to look for anything. But yeah, if you look me up on Spotify or YouTube under my name, it's Levi Petree. And if you want to follow along on Instagram, LP and the RP. And yeah, that's kind of, you can find most things from there.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, please take care. Please stay safe. It is a crazy time. Continue success, and we will talk again. But for now, listeners, you be safe. Please remember to social distance, wash your hands. As Bruce says, wear an effing mask, and we will talk to you soon. So, goodbye. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts as well as a Mary Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now, who does? You can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference. You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.